Welcome to Fringe Without the Cringe, a payroll manager's stress-free guide. I'm Shauna Coronado, your host for this 30-minute webinar. If you've ever struggled with fringe calculations, mid-year benefit changes, or state-by-state compliance chaos, you are not alone. Today's session is all about turning that cringe into confidence. We'll cover the most common pitfalls and give you real solutions that simplify your workflow. At eBacon, we believe in empowering construction teams to focus on what they do best, building America's future by simplifying payroll and workforce management concerns like fringe benefit issues. So now some housekeeping. Be sure to submit your questions in the chat area, and we will answer all that we can in the Q&A session following the webinar. In today's webinar, we'll cover state level and union complexities with fringe, job rate library management tips, managing benefit credit changes, reporting challenges, and more. And I'm pleased to introduce Aubrey Roach, who will share strategies for managing fringe benefits across multiple states, unions, and benefit programs. All right, over to you, Aubrey.
Thanks, Shauna. Everyone, thanks. I want to express my gratitude for you coming to this. We really like educating, the workforce and people dealing with all of these struggles. So today we're going to cover multiple things, but one of the things is that there are, in some states, they have rate changes mid-project, right? So they're called predetermined increases. And so what ends up happening is that you got to keep track of when those are going to happen, and they're not necessarily consistent, but you're still responsible for implementing those into your payroll to make sure that you're compliant with the job. Some of the other struggles are there's different forms. You got to manage which form goes that you have to submit for each job, whether it be a state form or a WH-347 or LCP tracker, among the few. Another one is, well, employees may work in multiple states on prevailing wage projects, so you kind of got to really dial down. If you're working in Arizona, what are the overtime rules? And then you move to California, they got different overtime rules. So you really got to manage those as well. And it's those items are difficult if you're not organized.
Aubrey, managing employees across state lines seems really tricky with all these inconsistent rate changes. So for our audience, can you share an example of how a company successfully navigated this compliance challenge?
Well, there's a couple different ways. One of the things is, rate tracking, making sure that you have a centralized location for rate tracking. And then also making sure that you have clear communication with your field guys and supervisors on when employees are working at different jobs that may cross state lines, whether that be through internal communication, paper forms, or a time and attendance system.
Excellent. Well, let's learn more about union and benefit program headaches.
So that's fun. So one of the things is that with unions, they have their own set of base rates and fringes that you got to pay to the unions, right? And some unions change their rates once a year, sometimes twice a year, sometimes more than that. So you really got to stay ahead of that to make sure that when the union has their changes, you implement those. One of the other things is that if you're using a couple different unions, they're going to have different rate structures, like let's say for laborers versus operating engineers. And then you got to submit those to the different unions and make sure you're keeping track of the hours and the rates that you're submitting to the union. Now, as far as non-union, some of the things that need to be kept track of are changes with your health insurance. So if you're taking credit on fringes for employer paid portion of the health insurance, if your policy renews May 1st, you're going to have to make sure to keep track and update the credits that you're taking based on the new rates. So unfortunately, the way that healthcare is going these days, the rates always increase. But on your end, you're paying that, so you need to take the credit for that increased rate. Now, with paid time off, this one's a little bit more tricky. One of the things is that you have paid time off, you're taking credit for it because you're paying your employees that time. But one of the things that you want to keep in consideration is that what kind of policy do you have? Is it a yearly deposit? or is it an accrual, right? When, and then also when does a person, we'll say, tier up this? So if they're a new hire and they have 40 hours, then you're taking credit on the 40 hours, right? But then let's say 5 years passes and they tier up to get 80 hours. You need to make sure to keep track of that so you're taking the appropriate credit for that paid time off. And so a couple different ways to do that is like, so if you're based on anniversary date, you got to keep track of when your employees are tearing up so that you can maximize your credit to make sure you're getting the full credit for what you're paying for PTO.
All right. Well, let's ask a poll. What's your biggest fringe benefit complaint and challenge? Let's launch the poll. And if you can just drop your answer in here and let us know which one of these is the bigger challenge for you, that would be great. We'll give you a few minutes here. All righty. I see some answers coming. Excellent. Okay, let's end and let's share the results. There we go. So you can see the results. All right, let's see if we can move on to the next slide, which is job rate library management.
Yeah, so this one's great, and especially with some of the poll questions, we're going to kind of go over how to keep track of all of this stuff. So one of the things, you may be using a system, you may be using a program to do some of this currently, but if you're not, one of the things is to make sure to have a central location for anyone involved, meaning in the payroll and personnel management as far as the rates go. You need to have a central location for everyone to access it, whether it be a drive or in Google Sheets or something of that nature, to keep track of the jobs and where they're located, what wage determinations are supposed to be included. Also, the overtime, if it's a different state, you want to make sure you have it logged in there, what kind of overtime they're supposed to get. Then also, one of the other things is that that's a place where you can keep track of, we'll say, changes in rates. So if you have predetermined increases, or let's say the union rates are changing July 1st, you need to set up, we'll say, like a calendar, but then also document it in that centralized location. But set up a calendar invite for yourself to reach out like 30 days before those are supposed to be implemented. So that way you have time to adjust your rates and to make sure that you have everything in place. Keeping everything in a centralized location will be great for also the changes in the fringes. So like we were talking about before, if somebody tiers up with paid time off or for medical, if somebody newly enrolled and you're covering some of the portion or the rates increased on renewal, you want to keep track of that there so that when you are updating your fringe benefit statements to send out, that they're accurate. And then also you have a historic log of what it was before and what it is now. Some of the other things that you need to take into consideration is, why would two employees doing the same thing show different fringes? So one of the things is that one employee may be on the health insurance and the other employee may not. So you'll see a difference in the fringe credits that you can take for those two employees. Now, while the total base of the base plus the fringes is going to stay the same, you still need to document how you're paying those fringes. So they could come to you and say, like, okay, prove to me that this employee is on health insurance and you're covering this. And then you can go and say, okay, they joined on this day and here's the insurance bill and this is what we're paying. One of the other things that's really exciting is when you pay an employee more than you're required to by the wage determination for the base rate. So while you still would be covering the entire total required amount, you can reduce the fringes by the amount that you're overpaying on the base rate. The total required is still there, but that explains the difference in why this employee has less fringes than another employee, is because of the base rate. One of the other things that can be hard to keep track of, but it's really important is what fringes are included for your different apprentices. As you know, some of the apprentices have where they come in at 1 or 2 or 3 as their level, they don't get certain fringes, like we'll say pension or annuity. They might not get those. So you need to keep track of that so that when you're allocating for your apprentices, that you're keeping track of which apprentices get what level of fringe. One of the other things that a lot of people don't realize that they can do, and we've already kind of covered it, but if you're paying for some of your employees' health insurance, you can take that as a fringe credit. So if you're not doing it now, you should start doing it because that's money you're leaving on the table because you're already paying it to the insurance company, right? So I always try and encourage people, if you're paying some of the premium, you need to take credit for it. A lot of companies don't, and they don't realize what they're missing out on.
What about the pro tip down at the bottom on bona fide fringe trust structures?
That is excellent, Shauna. Thank you for bringing that up. So one of the other things is that there are programs out there where, like, let's say you're not offering any paid time off or any medical insurance or anything that you're actually taking credits on. There are these things called bona fide fringe trusts. And so, like, eBacon has one of those where if you are not taking credit for any of that, you can actually put it into the fringe trust, which is actually a 401k or a pension program. And so it's a qualified credit. You're putting that money in there, and then the employees, depending on the trust program, have different options of what they can do with that fringe money.
Very good, very good. All right, let's touch base with managing fringe benefit credit issues.
So one of the things that we want to kind of really keep track of is that you got to keep a library or documentation of when the fringe credits are changing and why they're changing and who they're changing for. So then that way, if you ever get audited, God forbid, you have documentation of all of those changes. And the same thing goes for, the rates and the allocations for increases. You want to keep track of those as well so that you can prove, say, hey, I got it here, this is what I implemented, and this is what's happening moving forward. One of the other things that's really helpful to do is have assigned tasks for people, right? So when you're managing all of this, it can be a major struggle and headache for one person to do it all. So one of the things that you want to do is to make sure that you have a different people doing different things, so it's not all on you. So say like one person can be managing, the fringe credits. Another person could be managing the rate changes, whether they're for union or rate increases. One of the other important parts too is just to make sure that the people in the field, like the managers or foremen, know what's going on and know what changes are going to be happening. So then that way, if they get questions from employees, they understand.
Mhm. You've highlighted the importance of documentation for fringe changes, but for a company just starting to formalize their process, what's the single most important document they should create first?
They should create a checklist of basically everything that needs to be kept track of, but also for every job, you need to make sure that you have the wage determination associated with the job and the overtime calculation for that particular area. Those two things will be critical for reference.
Excellent. All right, let's talk about solving major reporting challenges.
So one of the things about reporting challenges is that you got to keep track of who you're reporting to, right? And in what format and in what platform. So having this in your centralized location for the job, it'll make it easy for you to go ahead and say, hey, okay, for job A, I got to do LCP tracker and I need to pay overtime at over 8 hours in a day, stuff like that. One of the things too that's helpful is to do checks on your payroll, meaning validate the rates that you're paying. Have somebody take a look at it and say, okay, yeah, this is what the base rate's supposed to be. This is what the fringes are supposed to be. Okay, great. To do an audit just to make sure you're staying in compliance. Because you know what? Sometimes we make mistakes. That just happens. We're human. So it's always nice to have somebody there to check your work. One of the other things is classifications, right? Are we paying the correct rate for the classification? So one of the things that's really important to keep track of is if you have a company where you're doing multiple different classifications, like let's say like we were talking about before, laborers or operating engineers, you got to know when your guys are doing that type of work. So keeping track of that will be critical to make sure that they get paid correctly.
Excellent. Let's launch another poll. And this one is, how much time, please answer for us, how much time does your team spend on fringe benefit administration monthly? Let me launch it right now. There we go. And shoot your answers in there. We're curious about how long it's taking you to complete these processes. Giving it a few minutes. Ooh, people are answering. Okay, it's looking good. Let me end and share the results so you all can see what the results are. So it looks like some of you are spending between 20 and 40 hours. And I love the answer. I'd rather not think about it. It's terrific. All right, we're going to close the poll and go to the next slide. And this is about eBacon technology and how we can help.
So all of the things that we were discussing earlier, that talking about the challenges of keeping track of all of these moving parts, is one area that eBacon can really help with. So our system automatically calculates the fringe credits that you're taking. It also knows what determination to put on the job. So if you say, hey, my job's in, this county and this state and the advertised date is this, when you go to assign a determination to that job, the system's going to say, hey, these are the ones that could be applicable based on the advertised date. One of the other things is also streamlining the increases as well. And our system also produces all the certified reports that you need to submit to the different agencies. So that's really helpful. One of the other things too is the time and attendance that we were talking about before, that, there are some systems out there that can do like tracking what the employee does. So what ours does is they clock into a job and they do a task. And so it says, okay, this is prevailing wage job A, and they're doing electrician work, right? They're an inside wireman. So pay them these rates. So you don't have to remember, it's always there. So that's really helpful. One of the other things that's really nice is that it keeps track of also the different overtimes that are applicable to different states. So you don't even have to worry about that. One of the ways that we're able to, we'll say, stay on top of these things is we have notifications. So like, let's say your medical policy renews in May, right? So we send out a notification to you saying, hey, your policy is ending in May. We're going to need new employer contributions so we can update your fringes. And the same thing with unions. So when the union rates are ending, we'll say at the end of June, the system will send out an email and say, hey, your rates are ending at the end of June. We're going to need updated rates so we can make sure that they're in there. So it's really nice. And then the other thing that we had mentioned before that's truly a benefit to all of you is the fringe trust. So if you're paying the fringes in cash right now, you're paying taxes on those. If you're taking some credits but not all of them, and then paying some of them in cash, that's still, you're still paying taxes on it. And nobody wants to pay more taxes than they have to, right? When you put the dollars into the fringe trust, what happens is you're not paying the taxes on those, and then your employees have the availability to do what they want with those fringe dollars. What makes our trust different is that they have a slew of options to choose from, one of which is taking cash distributions. They can take them when they need them, or they can take them every week or every time they process payroll. They can invest them in a 401k funds. They can save for first time home or college. I mean, there's so many different options that they can choose from that it's a real benefit.
Well, that's excellent. And the next slide is what we call the path to success. What are your tips?
Right, so we were talking about before, you got to document everything because if you ever go through an audit, you will be safe with your documentation saying, I did this here and when and how and why. And then also just keeping everything really organized to where what the job is at, what determination to use, what classifications you're using, and staying in constant communication with your team as well, just making sure that everybody's on board, they know what they're supposed to do, they know what their rates are going to be, and making sure that you have a centralized location for everything for people to access, and then make sure that you have the checklist and then also those calendar reminders to say, hey, don't forget, there's going to be a rate increase on July 1st, or oh, I got to reach out to the union to get the new rates for September. Those will be really, really critical.
Wonderful tips to help make it smoother. All right. We are through with the main part of our webinar. Thank you, Aubrey, for the presentation. So appreciated. And let's move on to our Q&A session with the questions submitted through chat. And we'll see what the questions are. So hold on one moment. I'm going to bring that up and see what our questions are. Okay. Violet asks, Aubrey, what other fringe benefits can employers take credit for other than health, pension, 401k, life insurance, PTO? Are there other fringe benefits?
It depends on your location, what you can actually take credit for. So in different states, they allow for different things. So it's not same across the board, but for the most part, all of the ones that you mentioned are the basic ones. There's also training. So you can take credit for training if we'll say that you're part of like a training um, approved committee, like so your apprentices. And also if you're required to pay the training as part of like we'll say the state
Mhm.
requires you to do it. The same thing with federal. Federally, you can take credit for training, but as long as you're a part of an accredited program.
Michaela asked this question. What's the benefit of using the fringe trust versus just paying the remaining portion of the fringe on the employee's check?
Well, so like we were talking about before, that there's tax savings to you. So when you're paying it on the paycheck, you're paying the Social Security and Medicare, right? And then also it's part of workers' comp wages as well. So we want to take into consideration that you would be saving money on those things by actually putting them into the Fringe Trust because technically that is a pension plan. And so it's all pre-tax. So it just moves the money over and you're not paying taxes on those.
Got it. So Kathy asks about the Fringe Trust Fund. How is that reported? Does it fall under the same area on the W-2 like a 401k does?
No, actually, because they're distributions, they actually get a different form. It's called a 1099-R, and it'll shows what was an in-service distribution and what taxes were paid on it at the time of distribution. So they'll need to file that with their W-2.
Hmm. She asks another question, Kathy, is yours, meaning our, is eBacon the standalone system or does it interface with our accounting system in place?
Well, it really depends on the accounting system, but that's a great question. So there isn't, we'll say necessarily an integration, but like, for example, tons of people use QuickBooks, right? So what our system can do is, after you process your payroll, you can download a file, it's the general ledger file to import into QuickBooks to update your books. When you come on board with us, we spend time and have a full conversation about what system you're using, what it can take, because some systems can't take an import, and then what you need and how you need your stuff mapped, and we get that built for you.
Excellent. We do have another question, and this is also from Christy. My question is, if we have ER benefits to get the credit, do we take that amount as credit to Fringe paid currently to employee as cash? Does that make sense? Should I?
Yes, no,
Okay.
that makes sense. So what I believe you're asking is that right now you're just paying the credit to your employee as cash, but you are actually paying for their health insurance. So like let's say you're paying 50% of the employee's health insurance, right? So you can actually take credit for that. You have to annualize it, but you can take an hourly credit for that so that you don't have to pay that to your employee in cash.
Great. Kathy asks another question. How does the reporting to you work? Employer paid health benefits specifically. Do we send you an Excel spreadsheet or does it work in another way?
So there's a couple of different ways to do it, but the most common is just sending over your monthly employer portion for the benefits for the employees that have them, and then we go ahead and enter those to calculate the credits for you for your payrolls.
Excellent. You did a great job, Aubrey. You really know your stuff. This is this is so challenging for everyone, and you've got all the answers. Excellent. Well, that's us for our Q&A. So let's go to the next slide here. If I can get it to do that. Hold on one second. All right. We have had a great day with everyone today. Thank you so much for joining us. And we hope that you found this session helpful and that you're inspired to take steps toward better management of all things Fringe. And we do have a lot of resources for you. We are going to, of course, be sending out some free surprises for you, some guides that will be helpful for you. But we also, you can go to our website and you can contact us for support. And especially if you would like to set up a personalized tour, a little demo to discuss how bona fide French trust and all the French stuff works, we are happy to help you do that. And there you have it. Thank you so much. And if you have any further questions, we'll be reaching out for you to contact you and we can connect then. So thank you very much.